West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire.
DOJ prosecutor Jack Smith is building this case against Trump, who goes on trial in March. That's the biggest and first case Trump faces, and we're now getting an account of what his vice president told the DOJ. Pence reportedly telling investigators how he clearly and repeatedly emphasized to Trump that rejecting the votes on January 6th, of course, would violate the Constitution, and that he told prosecutors he's sure he told Trump there was no evidence of fraud. Here's what Pence has said publicly.
The president's words that day at the rally endangered me and my family and everyone at the Capitol building. It doesn't take courage to break the law. It takes courage to uphold the law. I mean, the president's words were reckless. It was clear he decided to be part of the problem.
Part of the problem is putting it mildly, considering that Donald Trump fanned the flames as Mike Pence was literally targeted for assassination. A gallows was hung up on Jan 6th. And what's striking here is that old footage we just showed you, of course, was in a different political chapter. Pence was still running for president. Now he has quit, which means he's no longer politically trying to somehow hold open a door to Republican faithful or MAGA. Also, we learned, according to this report, that before January 6th, Pence had considered and even momentarily decided he would just skip the Jan 6 certification, according to this ABC report. And there were too many questions and it would be too hurtful to Trump. Quote, therefore, I'm not going to participate in certification of election is at least what was the plan in that draft. We know, of course, Pence ultimately did participate. Now, Trump and his allies had a multi-pronged conspiracy to overturn the results. We've shown you those arrows. Jack Smith has now indicted 5 of them, and one of them was the effort to try to get Pence to illegally, and as he put it, unconstitutionally, steal the results somehow that day. Now, that could have been unprecedented. Instead, we got a different unprecedented situation, the insurrection, which saw Pence fleeing from the mob. Jack Smith's team also pressing Pence on, well, what he put in that now infamous book. For example, the phone call they had on Christmas. In the book, Pence wrote, Trump said, Pence told Trump, I should say, I don't have the authority. Pence told Smith's investigators he meant to write the sentence without a comma and admonished Trump by saying, comma, I don't think I have the authority. But what do you see in that report?
I think he's going to be a star witness for the prosecution. He is in the room with Trump saying, I told him I thought these lawyers were crank lawyers. I told him that I didn't see any evidence of election fraud. I told him that it would be un-American for me to not show up and certify the count. I mean, those are really damning statements that he can say he told Donald Trump personally. And, Donald Trump's strategy, according to a filing yesterday, his team is trying to discredit Mike Pence by saying that he's biased against Trump because he was trying to get out of the mishandling of classified information investigation, which really just seems ludicrous. They found one document in his house. It was a consensual search. So I don't really, it seems kind of a desperate strategy to
Is it progress that they're trying to verbally discredit him rather than having other people kill him?
I don't know that it's progress at all. I think all of it will fail. I mean, I don't think anybody is going to believe that Mike Pence was biased against Trump. He seems pretty loyal to him, almost like a George McFly to his Biff Tannen. But at the end, you know, what does George McFly do? He strikes the knockout punch, and that's what I think will happen at this trial. I think he's going to be a very credible witness because he was loyal. He didn't have any reason to go against Trump here. He had every reason to try and stay in office, but he did the right thing in the end.
Hugo, I'm sure you appreciate the time machine references from Back to the Future. I don't know if it might be slightly before your time. It's possible. Over your head.
Yeah.
Over your head.
Sorry.
We appreciate the honesty.
Well,
I was Rick and Morty. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah.
That is a fictional universe that grew out of the Back to the Future universe.
Well, there you go.
So,
I mean,
you know, and imagine if you have a time machine, which they did have, you can use it for good or evil, as we learned in the trilogy. Not to digress too much, I'm not going to put you on the spot if you don't know that particular film. But when you see this part about, Pence might have skipped the whole thing, because it's a what if and didn't happen, I don't know how much criminal liability is there, but I thought it was interesting that it came up, and as someone who's covered this very closely, and we showed our arrows, we've kept an eye on it as well. What do you read into that the pressure campaign built to the point and the political cost was going to be such that at least Mike Pence at one point in time was writing down his excuse for skipping his biggest assignment of the year?
I think it kind of shows a kind of a window into the real high pressure situation that Pence was in at the time, and how seriously I think there was a discussion and clearly some kind of steps towards having not, Pence be there on January 6th, and for that to either be a contingent election or to have these fake slates go, have Chuck Grassley preside. I mean, for a long time, we didn't know if this was even something that was, formally or credibly discussed. But if you look at Pence's notes, and Pence is saying, well, at this rate, I'm not going to preside on January 6th, and he was only talked out of it by his 20-year-old son, I thought that was extremely significant. Because
the obvious implication is he skips so they can put in a thug. We talking Godfather. I want a wartime consigliere. They wanted a thug. Mike Pence, who'd been loyal to Donald Trump about everything, as we learned in the committee hearings and everything else, looked at this and said he's super politically loyal, but he won't do a coup. And so the idea was he would step out not to have someone else do what he did, but that they would put in a fixer who would be a thug who would help with a coup, yes?
Who would do what Trump wanted to do, because Pence would not do him this final favor, which was to either throw things to the House of Representatives. This was something that came up in discussions with Steve Bannon and, some of the other people on the fringes who are more interested in that kind of strategy. Or even if you were to have it as, John Eastman wanted on January 6th, which was to, have some sort of, we don't know what is going on, maybe we will not count certain slates, we might count others. Pence was not willing to go with any of that.
And that really goes to where I think there is a challenge for Jack Smith, Christie, between all of the bananas circus stuff and what it was in service of. So Donald Trump has talked brazy. Do you know that term? Wild or brazy? He's been brazy about many topics, not always important ones. This was important. The committee, I want to show, looked at all the ways he was attacking Pence, and it's easy possible to just start feeling like this is a Beltway coup edition of Real Housewives with all these people who deserve each other fighting and calling each other names. But underneath that was something important. So I want your reaction to how do you take this to a jury and make it matter? Let's look at that sound.
I remember hearing the word wimp. Either he called him a wimp. I don't remember if he said, you are a wimp, you'll be a wimp. Wimp is the word I remember.
It was a different tone than I'd heard him take with the vice president before.
Do you remember what she said her father called him?
The P word.
So that plays one way, and we can discuss that and the misogyny of it, and it plays on the internet. But this isn't a discussion about what's proper speech, right? This is about whether the pressure campaign against Pence, all those things combined with the public pressure to make this a political litmus test, was in service of the coup. How do you explain that to a jury and not have them get lost in the drama of it?
Well, again, I think you need credible witnesses to really tell that story, to play out what was this campaign, what was the pressure campaign, what were the things that were being said, and what was the effect on Mike Pence. I mean, again, as Hugo mentioned, there's this conversation that Pence really is having with his son, who's a Marine, and says, well, we both took the same oath, so you to uphold the Constitution, so you have to show up. I mean, that's going to play very well to a jury, this kind of tortured soul trying to figure out what to do when he's got this pressure campaign on him. What is the right thing to do? He's got his notes saying he's thinking about not doing, but ultimately
but let me jump in.
Shows up.
If I'm a defense lawyer for Trump, and you're saying that, I'm going to be telling the jury, this isn't about whether Mike Pence is a hero. Call him a hero if you want. The thing you say is so bad didn't really happen, right? He's not on trial for storming the Capitol, the insurrection. The coup part didn't happen. So how do you land that? Because you can get up in closing defense arguments and tell the jury, great, we heard a lot about all these great people who stood up. Fine, they stood up. No coup here. They didn't pull it off. No crime here.
They didn't pull it off, but the issue is, what was their intent? Their intent was clearly to try and pull it off, and they did so many different things to try to pull it off, one of which being the pressure campaign against Mike Pence, to try to get him to not show up, put in a thug, and have them not certify the count. So I think it's a multi-pronged strategy for Jack Smith to really show all the different ways that Trump intended. It doesn't matter. He doesn't have to have pulled it off to be guilty. It's a conspiracy. All he has to do is agree with others to break the law and take acts in furtherance of that, even if they didn't actually execute the crime itself. So I think that story is going to really be told through a lot of these witnesses. And it's got that housewives element to it, but you know what? That'll keep the jury's attention.
Yeah.
It's going to be riveting.
It is Wednesday, the 29th of November of 2023, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef. Precious, the little Yorkie, is our door girl, and she will be seating you directly for our especially special daily special, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Will no one rid us of these meddlesome priests? No one. And especially the ones meddling with the hollandaise sauce. Get your hands out of that. Okay? Might mess it up. Too many priests in the hollandaise. Yeah, it's a sin. I'm just saying. It is. Okay, well, looks like Pizzagate is back in the news thanks to Elon. What an idiot. I love the fact that he goes over there and hobnobs with Bibi. And I'll say it once again. Why did they give Elon the little boy flak vest? I mean, look at everybody else. Bibi is like covering his crotch. You know, all the other people there, you know, I think there were some military types and whatnot. They're all got flak vests covering their crotch, you know, that big. Elon's wearing one that comes down barely to his sternum. Oh my God. And he didn't say anything. He didn't know. Yeah. So he went over there, got the photo ops that he wanted. And now he's back in the States pushing anti-Semitic tropes of George Soros and Pizzagate. So now, I don't know about you, maybe you don't want to go on Twitter, and I don't blame you, but some of us are there for the duration because, well, we like to get our little 2 cents in anyway. My timeline has now been inundated with all sorts of weird Pizzagate BS that is absolutely false. I mean, they're pushing lies that Podesta's son was arrested for pedophilia or something. It's just crazy shit. It is not true. Let alone the fact that there's no basement at Comet Pizza in which the pedophilia and the baby eating is supposed to have taken place by Podesta, Hillary, and others. And a guy shot the place up. And I got to tell you, I have friends that don't live very far from Comet Pizza. I would almost consider them to be experts on it since they used to go there. No, maybe they still do, but they would go there regularly with their kids. It was a family place. And a guy came there and shot the place up looking for the basement where they're holding the kids. There is no basement at Comet Pizza. Now, that guy went to jail. But now, Elon knows better than the rest of us. There's any number of weird, like, New Age MAGA Nazi BS, like some Queen of Light lady who spells Christ with a K. I wonder what that's all about. How many KKKs are there in Christ? Holy hell. The use of crystals and chakras, I kid you not. New Age MAGA Nazi bullshit, and they're going to save the kids. I know exactly what they're doing. When they talk about drinking baby blood, it's not the Democratic people and liberals doing that. Whenever they say something is happening, I would be very afraid because these mofos project everything. Absolutely everything. All right, well, we have somewhat of a busy day today here, and I need to take a little break to get the dogs outside. How dare they disturb us during the middle of the show? It's not even the middle, it's the beginning. So why don't we give you a rundown on what we have in store for you? Then I'll take that little break, and that'll be just enough to get these canines out the door. Into the freezing air, how dare they? They like it. Nonetheless, Jack Smith is going on the offense with Pence's testimony, and that is Donald Trump's worst court nightmare. Well, maybe not the worst, but it's up there. On the rest of the menu, speaking of Elon Musk, his Cybertruck is already a production nightmare for Tesla. Yeah, they just can't line up the panels. I wonder why. We'll find out. James Comer forgets his own behavior after calling out the Dems. Well, self-reflection and self-awareness is not really their strong suit, is it? And Michigan will join the state-level effort to regulate artificial intelligence political ads as Congress debates more sweeping regulations ahead of the 2024 elections. After the break, we move to the chef's table where Poland's president swears in a government expected to last no longer than 14 days. And a diplomatic spat over the Parthenon marbles has scuttled a meeting between the leaders of Britain and Greece. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. Across the page to the left from that chat room link that's near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com is a link to our Patreon page. If you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, it really does help us pay our bills and all the other costs that are incurred running this powerhouse of resistance, and your generosity has helped us do that. And we found that when we pay our bills, we somehow are able to fly under the radar and continue this powerhouse of resistance. So thank you for your generosity, and we need it even more this time of year. Unfortunately, I know how it is with the holidays and whatnot, but the bigger or the higher dollar bills come in at the end of the year. Don't ask me why. That's the way they like it. And we just pay our bills. So thank you for helping us do so. And more importantly, fulfill our civic duty as the founders originally intended so many years ago. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, Mastodon, Spoutable, Blue Sky, wherever, even on Facebook, you can do so by going to @Netroots Radio, and Tom takes care of those. And Kelly takes care of the Facebook page, so thank you to you too. Follow me on those social media platforms @Justice Putnam. And I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Kos 10 minutes before showtime so that you can actually read the actual articles from the actual reporters who have been doing the reportage. And it's more than a civic duty. It's just like, we do that. So do it. Follow me. You can also follow the show on Twitter. I know it's just a placeholder, but you can do so at Cookbook West. And please do pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. Just not on Stitcher. And you know why. Okay. Got the particulars out of the way. Here we go. This first offering here in the Bistro Cafe is out of the Los Angeles Times by Dana Hall. The Cybertruck has not even hit the market yet, and Elon Musk already is lamenting that Tesla has dug its own grave. Its stainless steel body may be able to withstand bullets and arrows, but it's going to be a bear putting the panels together. It will be Tesla's first high-voltage vehicle, offering the benefit of faster charging, but also potential pitfalls. And it will be Tesla's only product dependent on in-house battery cells that are years behind schedule. In these respects and others, the Cybertruck will be a big step backward from how Tesla has progressed in its approach to car making. The last vehicle Musk spoke about the way he's described the Cybertruck was the Model X, the sport utility vehicle that's never reached high volumes because of what its chief executive described on several occasions as hubris. Really. Model X became kind of like a technology bandwagon and every cool thing we could imagine all at once, Musk said in the SUV in May of 2017. In a terrible accent that originates from war. That is a terrible strategy. You really want to start off simple and add things over time. An emphasis on simplicity and designing for ease of manufacturing served Tesla well with its next product, the Model 3 sedan, and the smash hit Model Y SUV that followed. The two were the first electric vehicles to break into the mainstream, making Tesla far and away the most valuable automaker and its CEO the world's wealthiest man. Let us be clear. Musk doesn't invent anything. He's not an engineer. He bought this company in a hostile takeover and ousted the two founders. No wonder he's having trouble manufacturing this car. Because the people who are actually doing the manufacturing of this car have to not listen to Elon Musk. I'm just saying. Musk remarked when the Model 3 was starting production in 2017 that it wouldn't have all sorts of bells and whistles like the Model X, which featured double-hinged doors and floating second-row seats. Last month, on the same earnings call during which Musk referred to Tesla digging its own grave, he warned that the Cybertruck has a lot of bells and whistles. Tesla may eventually overcome what its CEO has described as enormous challenges making the Cybertruck in high volumes and without burning through cash. But Musk himself has estimated this will take 12 to 18 months of blood, sweat, and tears. He's also said Tesla is unlikely to reach an annualized production rate of 250,000 Cybertrucks until sometime in 2025. Musk has called the Model X the Fabergé egg of cars, referring to the rare symbols of opulence crafted using precious metals and gemstones. Probably nothing like it will ever be made again, and maybe it shouldn't. he said in January of 2019. 10 months later, Musk strode onto a stage at Tesla's design center in Hawthorne and told a crowd of fans that pickup trucks had all looked more or less the same over the last century. The company wanted to try something different. Minutes later, the vehicle that rolled onto the stage through smoke, strobe lights, and balls of fire lived up to the CEO's billing as something out of the sci-fi film Blade Runner. The Cybertruck's triangular roof, angular exterior, and transparent metal glass that shattered in a botched demo instantly became the stuff of memes. Tesla started taking deposits on the truck, marketing starting prices ranging from $39,900 to $69,900. Got to keep it under the round numbers like 40 and 70. The company initially said deliveries would begin no sooner than late 2021. It's 2023 now, though. Around the time it was supposed to start handing over the pickup to customers, Tesla removed Cybertruck's pricing and specifications from its website and has not restored them since. A key reason it's taken the company 2 more years than expected to start deliveries was the decision to clad the vehicle with an ultra-hard stainless steel alloy, which Musk said his rocket company, SpaceX, also would use for Starship, its launch vehicle designed to someday reach Mars. Although stainless steel resists corrosion and does not need to be painted, it can be costly and difficult to shape and weld together. It also tends to be heavier than steel commonly used for most car and truck bodies. In late August, 3 months before Tesla's scheduled start of deliveries, Musk wrote an email to Tesla employees that was leaked to an online forum. Due to the nature of Cybertruck, which is made of bright metal with mostly straight edges, any dimensional variation shows up like a sore thumb. Musk ordered all parts for the vehicle to be designed and built to sub-10 micron accuracy, or 10 millionths of a meter. When Franz von Holzhausen, Tesla's chief designer, showed up to a car enthusiast event in Southern California earlier this month with a Cybertruck prototype, photos quickly surfaced showing misaligned fender flares and panel gaps wide enough to stick a finger through. Joey Capoletti and Ali Swenson of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Michigan is joining an effort to curb deceptive uses of artificial intelligence and manipulated media through state-level policies, as Congress and the Federal Elections Commission continue to debate more sweeping regulations ahead of the 2024 elections. Campaigns on the state and federal level will be required to clearly say which political advertisements airing in Michigan were created using artificial intelligence under legislation expected to be signed in the coming days by Governor Gretchen Whitmer, a Democrat. It would prohibit use of AI-generated deep fakes within 90 days of an election without a separate disclosure identifying the media as manipulated. There are increasing concerns that generative AI will be used in the 2024 presidential race to mislead voters, impersonate candidates, and undermine elections on a scale and at a speed not yet seen. Candidates and committees in the race already are experimenting with the rapidly advancing technology, which in recent years has become cheaper, faster, and easier for the public to use. So far, states including California, Minnesota, Texas, and Washington have passed laws regulating deepfakes in political advertising. Similar legislation has been introduced in Illinois, New Jersey, and New York. Of course, as sometimes happens, and hasn't happened in quite a while, I got our order mixed up here. So let us now go to the Daily Beast, where William Valancourt brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer explained on Newsmax yesterday, Tuesday, why he opposed Hunter Biden's offer to publicly testify, claiming that he first wants a closed-door deposition and not chaotic public hearings in which Democrats cannot conduct themselves in a mature, credible manner. Like I said, they project about everything. We're doing this investigation the way it's supposed to be done, just like Benghazi. And the subpoena calls for Hunter Biden to come in for a deposition, Comer told the Balance host Eric Bolling. And that's what we expect to have, a deposition where the transcripts will be released. When you have a deposition, the committee votes to release the transcripts. After the January 6th committee, the depositions were filmed. So this deposition will be filmed with deepfakes. Comer, who subpoenaed Joe Biden's son earlier this month amid the Kentucky lawmakers' unsubstantiated allegations of shady business practices, said he welcomed the younger Biden's public testimony, but at a later date, after they billboarded it and told the American public every lie they can come up with. And so then when the truth of the actual testimony comes to the fore, no one remembers it. All right, let us now go to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, A Song of Snow. The Hunger Games is back, but those expecting the same level of excitement as the previous movies may be left wanting. Directed by Francis Lawrence, who helmed the other films and set 64 years prior to the events of the first installment, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes is a prequel which tells the origin story of the notorious President Cornelius Snow, the villain we all came to know and hate in the original trilogy. In this one, we see the events that turned him from an ambitious but empathetic teen into a sadistic autocrat. Played by relative newcomer Tom Blythe, Snow is tasked with mentoring District 12 tribute Lucy Gray Baird, played by Rachel Zegler, as she and others prepare for the 10th annual Hunger Games. While mentoring Lucy Gray appears to be a hopeless task, and certainly not one he chooses, Snow quickly realizes that he has little choice, especially since he's attempting to restore his family's former good name. There's an entire subplot devoted to what caused the Snow family's fall from grace, but sadly, the film spends too little time with it. While Blythe and Zegler are fine in their respective lead roles, it's the supporting actors who really make this movie interesting, including Viola Davis as vicious head game master Dr. Gall, and the always great Peter Dinklage as Snow's often inebriated professor Dean Highbottom. Indeed, the Highbottom character is interesting enough that it could sustain its own spin-off. However, despite strong performances, dazzling production design, and its gritty political undercurrent, the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes seems a tad lackluster compared to the buzzworthy previous outings. But for fans of the novels and the film franchise, this one, overall, is a respectable offering. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
Hi, this is Your Health Quickly, a Scientific American podcast series.
We bring you the latest vital health news, discoveries that affect your body and your mind.
And we break down the medical research to help you stay healthy. I'm Tanya Lewis.
I'm Josh Fishman.
We are Scientific American senior health editors.
On today's show, we're going to talk about the alarming decline in vaccination rates for childhood illnesses like measles and polio, and what we should do about it before there's an outbreak.
COVID gave a huge boost to the anti-vax movement. But vaccination rates for many childhood diseases were starting to erode long before that.
That's right. It started with people like Jenny McCarthy and Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who were spreading false information about the effects of vaccines and autism. And it got amplified from there. It's really become an organized movement now.
Absolutely. So it may not surprise you that during the pandemic, the number of kids getting routine vaccinations fell even more, leaving them more vulnerable to these diseases.
That's not good. The last thing we need is another measles or whooping cough outbreak.
Exactly. And some of these diseases can cause serious disability or even death. Remember polio?
My parents remember it vividly. Kids on crutches, horror stories of iron lungs, people fearing summer because that's when cases peaked. And Jonas Salk became a huge hero because of his polio vaccine in the 1950s.
Right. It was a scary time. Thanks to vaccines, polio was nearly eradicated worldwide, except for Afghanistan and Pakistan. In August of 2022, there was a case of polio in Rockland County, New York, the first U.S. polio case since 2013. The virus was also found circulating in wastewater. In fact, vaccination rates for polio in the Americas have dropped to about 80%, much lower than the 95% threshold that public health authorities say is needed.
And Tanya, it's not just polio, right?
Right. It's also diseases like measles, mumps, and rubella, or tetanus, diphtheria, and pertussis. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention just came out with a report saying that between 2019 and 2022, vaccination rates for many childhood diseases dropped from 95% to around 93% nationwide. And Idaho had the lowest vaccination rate at just over 81%.
You know, to me, a change from 95 to 93% doesn't sound like a huge drop. But for diseases like measles, which are extremely contagious, it's a big deal. Infectious disease specialists say that anything less than 95% vaccination coverage could lead to an outbreak.
Exactly. And we saw such outbreaks even before the pandemic. In 2019, there were more than 1,200 cases of measles across 31 states, the highest number since 1992. And most of the cases were in unvaccinated kids. These trends only got worse during the pandemic. Measles cases increased by an estimated 18% worldwide, and deaths increased by 43% in 2022 compared with 2021, according to a recent report. So to find out why childhood vaccinations have declined, I talked to Jennifer Nuzzo.
I'm Jennifer Nuzzo. I'm the director of the Pandemic Center and professor of epidemiology at the Brown University School of Public Health.
I asked her about the nationwide drop in childhood vaccination rates.
Seeing it slip below 95 is deeply troubling, but the problem is actually probably greater than even that 93% statistic would suggest, because that's sort of a nationwide average. You can still have pockets of the population where the coverage is actually quite low. And we have seen in the past, where a state maybe has generally good vaccination coverage, but within a county, for instance, the coverage may be quite low. And we've seen outbreaks occur in those circumstances.
So what is driving this drop in the vaccination rates? Is it the anti-vaxxers, or is there something more complex going on that I'm not quite getting?
So I think we probably have a few things going on. And I think more work is definitely needed to figure out, which among these things is driving this decline in coverage the most. But first of all, there were gaps in sort of preventative care that occurred during the pandemic. And the coverage declines for MMR, we don't see across all age groups. And it suggests that perhaps some kids are still getting caught up.
Basically, kids got behind on their shots because they weren't going to the doctor as much during the pandemic, or they didn't have access to medical care.
Right. That's definitely part of it.
I'm also mindful of the fact that we do see a difference in coverage according to insurance status and according to different patient demographics, which may suggest that there are just gaps in provider coverage or not sufficient abilities to access vaccines in certain places.
Nuzzo pointed out that it's still a challenge for parents to get their kids vaccinated in general.
It just still feels too hard. I mean, it seems unacceptable for me that parents have to take off of work in order to make sure they can get to an appointment that's frustratingly scheduled in the middle of the day, et cetera. That's just not necessarily things that all parents can just easily do. So we need to make it easier for parents to get their kids vaccinated.
But vaccine hesitancy and misinformation have clearly also played a role.
I do think that there has been an unfortunate attack on vaccines and perhaps a growing share of the American public questioning the value and safety of vaccines now as a result of the pandemic and a lot of the mis and disinformation that circulated around.
Every U.S. state has a mandate requiring kids to be vaccinated in order to attend school.
There are exceptions, though, sometimes for medical reasons. But in recent years, more parents have gotten vaccine exemptions for their kids on religious or philosophical grounds.
Right. The exemption rate increased to 3% nationwide in 2022, and in 10 states, it was over 5%.
And just to be clear, I mean, the surveys show that still the vast majority of Americans support school-based vaccine mandates. So there still is broad public support for vaccine mandates. That said, we are seeing a rise in exemptions, and we need to understand why that is.
Surveys suggest that Americans' trust in science has declined during the pandemic. The news isn't all bad, though. A recent Pew study found that most Americans still have positive views of childhood vaccines in general. But about half of parents of children 4 and younger say they worry that not all childhood vaccines are necessary.
I've heard parents talk about this. In some ways, vaccines are a victim of their own success. We don't see a lot of childhood diseases that vaccines prevent, so people have stopped worrying about getting them.
Right. Plus, during the pandemic, COVID vaccines became politicized, and that spilled over to other vaccines as well. But Nuzzo, a parent herself, points out that healthcare providers haven't done a great job addressing parents' genuine concerns.
I think that there have been a lot of questions that we've not appropriately or sufficiently answered that have left lingering doubts in parents' minds or have contributed to growing doubts in parents' minds. And this is really something that I think we have to get ahead of because if just left to its own, continue to grow and grow.
Basically, Nuzzo says this is a wake-up call that we should be paying attention to parents' concerns about vaccines and addressing them before an outbreak happens.
We need to take this as an important signal and start building the infrastructure and the trust that is necessary to bring people back to the side where they're incredibly grateful for the advantages that vaccines offer.
Your Health Quickly is produced by Talika Bose, Jeff Del Vicio, Kelso Harper, Corinne Leong, and by us. It's edited by Ella Fetter and Alexa Lim. Our music is composed by Dominic Smith.
Our show is part of Scientific American's podcast, Science Quickly. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. If you like the show, give us a rating or a review. And if you have a topic you want us to cover, you can email us at yourhealthquickly@sciam.com. That's yourhealthquickly@sciam.com. For Your Health Quickly, I'm Tanya Lewis.
And I'm Josh Fishman.
See you next time.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Senator Mark Wayne Mullen of Oklahoma wants to go back to the good old days when men were men. I'm Bill Newman. This is the Civil Liberties Minute, and that was the beginning of a recent editor's letter in The Week magazine, which continued after When Men Were Men, quote, and members of Congress routinely pummeled each other into bloody oblivion. What prompted this comment was, of course, the recent hearing where Senator Mullen, who, having taken umbrage at a social media post by the witness, Teamsters President Sean O'Brien, challenged the witness during his testimony to a fist fight, yelling at him to, quote, stand your butt up. The committee chair, Senator Bernie Sanders, gavelled the would-be pugilists into submission by insisting to Senator Mullen that he was, after all, and we quote, a senator. After the brouhaha, Senator Mullen refused to apologize and noted to Fox News that duels and brawls among federal elected officials were not uncommon in Washington in the 1800s and suggested that fistfights today might help restore respect for Congress. The senator's post-hearing remarks did not mention that the United States Senate, not so long ago, was often referred to as the world's greatest deliberative body. The Senate as the world's greatest deliberative body. Now, that, may we suggest, would be the good old days. And we can all hope that those good old days are not gone forever. This Uncivil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
You're listening to the American Democracy Minute, keeping your government by and for the people. The New Mexico Supreme Court upheld a lower court's ruling on November 27th, allowing the state's congressional districts to stand. The same day, the Ohio Supreme Court upheld gerrymandered state legislature maps, which had been previously struck down by the same court. Ohio's maps ping-ponged between its partisan redistricting commission, the Ohio Supreme Court, and its legislature. The Ohio Constitution has a provision prohibiting partisan gerrymandering, so in 2021 and 2022, the court rejected the state house maps 5 times. But the retirement of a liberal justice and the appointment of a conservative replacement shifted the balance of power. In a 4-3 decision, Ohio's High Court affirmed maps vehemently opposed by democracy groups. The court cited bipartisan support for the maps, but the Ohio Capitol Journal reports 2 Democrats supporting the maps said their vote was intended to keep the map drawing away from the partisan redistricting commission. A ballot measure for an independent commission is proposed for next year. The New Mexico Supreme Court upheld a lower court which found the state had not broken rules prohibiting partisan gerrymandering when it drew its congressional districts. Map changes in the 2nd Congressional District resulted in a 4% shift, flipping the seat Democratic by less than 1%, according to the New Mexico Political Report. We have links to the local reporting and groups taking action at AmericanDemocracyMinute.org. I'm Brian Beal.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1937. That was the day the National Labor Relations Board began hearings on an unfair labor practice brought by the International Mine, Mill, and Smelters. Mine Mill had been fighting the union-busting tactics at Eagle Pitcher Lead Company. The union had been organizing lead and zinc miners in the tri-state area of Kansas, Missouri, and Oklahoma. During the Great Depression, they built the union by emphasizing safer working conditions, stressing the hazards of silicosis and tuberculosis. In their book, Deadly Dust, Silicosis and the Politics of Occupational Disease, Gerald Markowitz and David Rosmer note that one of Mine Mill's demands included the elimination of the company clinic. They argued it was used to target and fire diseased workers rather than provide a safe work environment. Mine Mill also organized in other area industries to counteract the near total power of mine owners in the region. When the union called a strike at area mines in May 1935, the area's largest producer, Eagle Pitcher Lead, moved quickly to force a lockout and establish a company union. During the hearings, the union was limited in its ability to raise health and safety issues. They did win reinstatement and back pay for workers fired during the strike, but the case brought national attention to silicosis in the tri-state area. In a letter to Francis Perkins the following year, the head of the Cherokee County Central Labor Body hoped to secure legislation to compel the companies to install ventilation systems and safety devices. He noted the average life of a miner was 7 to 10 years, with many dying in 2 or 3 years. But sadly, a federal standard on silica was still decades away. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 28 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting highs in the upper 40s, low 50s. Mainly sunny to start, then a few afternoon clouds. Winds light and variable, then cloudy skies early tonight. Then off and on rain showers overnight with lows in the low to mid 30s. Winds will be light and variable. Looks like it's going to be bringing us about a quarter of an inch overnight. Then rain tomorrow, highs in the mid 40s, winds light and variable. It looks like we're going to get about a quarter to a third of an inch of rain tomorrow. Pollen is rated as none here in our little town of Rogue River. The air quality index for the region is in the moderate range at 70 parts per million, mostly because people are burning wood in their fireplaces to stay warm. And that daytime UV index is in the low range at level 1. Barometric pressure is falling at 30.14 inches. Visibility is at 8 miles. And relative humidity is at 96%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world, and that is the Weather Underground. London is 39 degrees and mostly cloudy. Paris is 45 and partly cloudy. Rome is 55 with rain and its continuing disruption due to heavy wind. Bagram is 46 and mostly cloudy. Kyiv is 28 degrees and merely cloudy. Hong Kong is 73 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 51 and clear. Melbourne, Victoria, Australia is 60 degrees with rain showers and an advisory for potential damage due to heavy wind. San Francisco, California is 52 degrees and cloudy with a small craft advisory. Chicago, Illinois is 33 degrees and sunny. And New York is 35 degrees Fahrenheit with light rain. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Vanessa Guerra of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Poland's president swore in a government that is expected to last no longer than 14 days, a tactical maneuver that allows the Conservative Law and Justice Party to hang on to power a bit longer and make more appointments to state bodies. Following a national election in October, President Duda swore in Prime Minister Moriaki, who has held that position since late 2017. According to the Constitution, Moriaki and his cabinet will have 14 days to face a vote of confidence in Parliament. They are almost certain to lose the vote because Moriaki has no coalition partners after his nationalist and conservative Law and Justice Party lost its parliamentary majority and no other parties want to join its government. Moriaki says he's trying to find partners to govern with, but himself puts his chances at 10% or even less. Other members of Moriaki's new cabinet also took their oaths. Defense Minister Blazek remained, but most other of the ministries, including foreign, justice, and education ministries, were filled by new appointees. Some political veterans likely did not want to be a part of a government expected to fail. There were many women and young members in the new government, something Duda praised. He addressed them, telling them he knows most of them already, not as ministers, but as experts, as people who have so far worked in the second line. Critics of Moriaki and Duda, who was politically aligned with the Law and Justice Party, denounced the decision to tap government with no apparent chance at winning parliamentary backing as a hopeless act of political theater. Some critics point out that the outgoing party is using the time to make more appointments, which will extend its influence over state bodies, even after giving up the reins of government. It has, in recent days, nominated loyalists to head the state auditing body and the Financial Supervision Authority. After 8 years in power, Law and Justice won the most votes in the election but lost its parliamentary majority, getting just 194 seats in the 460-seat lower house of Parliament, the Sem. Power is already passing to a bloc of pro-EU parties that ran on 3 separate ballots but vowed to work together. They jointly gained a parliamentary majority of 248 seats and are already leading the work of the parliament.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Jill Lawless and Nicholas Papitas of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A diplomatic spat erupted between Greece and Britain after the UK cancelled a planned meeting of their prime ministers, prompting the Greek premier to accuse his British counterpart of trying to avoid discussing the contested Parthenon marbles. Greek Minister Mitsotakis is visiting London and had been expected to meet Prime Minister Sunak at 10 Downing Street yesterday. He was due to raise Greece's decades-old demand for the return of the ancient sculptures from the British Museum. Late Monday, Mitsotakis issued a statement to express my annoyance at the fact that the British Prime Minister has cancelled our planned meeting a few hours before it was due to take place. Greece and Britain are linked by traditional bonds of friendship, and the scope of our bilateral relations is very broad, the Greek Prime Minister said. Greece's position on the matter of the Parthenon sculptures are well known. I had hoped to have the opportunity to discuss them with my British counterpart, together with the current major international challenges: Gaza, Ukraine, climate change, and immigration. Whoever believes that his positions are well-founded and just is never afraid of engaging in a debate. Britain confirmed the two leaders would not meet and said Mitsotakis would hold talks with Deputy Prime Minister Oliver Dowden instead. It was unclear whether that meeting would happen. The BBC reported that the Greek leader had declined the invitation. Athens has long demanded the return of the sculptures that were removed from Greece by British diplomat Lord Elgin in the early 19th century. The sculptures, which originally adorned the 2,500-year-old Parthenon temple on the Acropolis, have been displayed at the British Museum in London for more than 2 centuries. About half the surviving marble works are in London, and the rest in a purpose-built museum under the Acropolis in Athens. Appearing on British television, Mitsotakis compared the separation of the sculptures to cutting the Mona Lisa in half, a remark that annoyed the British government. The British Museum is banned by law from giving the sculptures back to Greece, but its leaders have held talks with Greek officials about a compromise, such as a long-term loan. Leave it to the Brits to loan people's possessions back to them. All right, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we will meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.